Hey everyone, welcome to a quick BRAP video. I don't do a lot of videos or record a lot of videos. We typically do live streams, but wanted to talk about something that I've seen come across my timeline, and it especially came up as a result of the tweet that you see here on the screen that I tweeted out today. So let's talk about this topic of whether or not PlayStation is conducting illegal business deals that are hurting Xbox. Let's talk about this right now. Welcome, everyone. Do me a quick favor, smash that like button. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you're alerted when we go live. And I do have with me Game Logic. What's up, Game Logic?
Hey, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing good. Look, man, it's kind of been an interesting day. I have seen this narrative running around the internet, more specifically Twitter, that somehow PlayStation is making it hard for the Xbox to compete, specifically in Japan, with illegal deals. So now it sounds like third-party deals is illegal or anti-competitive. And so I put out this. I look, a lot of this stems, Game Logic, from the congressional letter asking the U.S. government to look into whether or not Japan's in violation of trade agreements with the United States, because they are making it difficult for Microsoft, the $1 trillion Microsoft corporation, to compete in Japan. Now, over the last 20-something years, Microsoft hasn't really made a lot of inroads in Japan. That's nothing new if you've been following the game industry for the last 20 years. Microsoft did at one point, as people say, hey, wait a minute, PlayStation is locking up all these deals with Japanese developers. At one time, Microsoft was really putting a lot of resources into Japan. They actually had an Xbox Japan division, which they have since shuttered. I believe that stopped after the 360 generation. But they did, make, third-party deals with companies like Mistwalker. If you remember the games Lost Odyssey, Blue Dragon, they have had third-party exclusive deals with Sega in the past. If you remember, Panzer Dragoon Orta on the original Xbox was an exclusive. Even Jet Set Radio Future was an exclusive for some time as well. So they've had deals with Japanese publishers in the past. Otogi being another game that was published by Sega from Software that was exclusive to the original Xbox. So they, for some time, were investing quite a bit in Japan, but haven't done so as much recently. And I feel like it's important to bring up Game Logic, because I think what's getting lost in the conversation here is that perhaps it isn't really just Sony making it difficult for Microsoft to be competitive in the Japanese market. Perhaps it's Microsoft who doesn't really see, perhaps it's Microsoft that doesn't really think that they need to invest the kind of money into being competitive in Japan, and maybe locking up some of these deals, as it is spending $70 billion and buying these, buying a large publisher like Apple, Activision, Blizzard King. So that's what's been kind of going around the conversation. I've heard this conversation on more Xbox fanatical podcasts that really kind of have a slanted view on this. And I tell you, Game Logic, I've heard some of the conversations, and people, some of the things they're saying really kind of raises an eyebrow, and I think kind of skates past some of the the history here with this Microsoft or Xbox in Japan. And again, now they're running with the talking point of, well, 98% of the market is controlled by Sony in Japan. You and I know, Game Logic, that's not true. Nintendo is dominating that particular market with the success of the Nintendo Switch. And when we had Reforge Gaming on, Lono on, he actually mentioned like 18 of the top 20 best-selling games in Japan were actually Nintendo first-party games. So All right, Logic. That was a lot to rattle off here, but that's kind of a quick summary of kind of what I've been seeing out there and what's some of the talking points and narratives that are being pushed out by these podcasts. But again, I want to have a more level-headed conversation about this because that's clearly been lost as it relates to the inquiry by Congress and to this tweet that I have posted up here. When I said the hyper focus on Sony paying third-party publishers leaves out additional context. The publishers are also agreeing to these deals. It's a mutual agreement between two parties. And of course, once I tweeted that, the green flag bearers jumped in, and then it just went downhill from there. But it's interesting because I have seen a lot of focus, a lot of conversation. Oh, Sony's doing this, Sony's doing that. I heard one podcaster compare Sony's third-party content deals they had with third-party publishers as making deals in back alleys or in the shadows, which is crazy. It's crazy to even describe it like that. This is a business practice that has been part of the industry for the 30 plus years that I can remember. If you think what Sony's doing is egregious, you should go back to the days of the Nintendo Entertainment System and how Nintendo was. So, but yeah, so Game Logic, what are your thoughts about all this stuff that you're seeing out there? Because you've seen it too, and I know we've talked about it behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to even think of a place to start with some of these things. I think predominantly, I agree with you in terms of, I think part of the problem with the argument this afternoon, particularly with one specific individual who as late as 8:30 p.m. Eastern time was still arguing with himself in a thread that I had stopped paying attention to a little bit before 7, and had been going on since 11 a.m. this morning. The thing is, just like you said, right? The problem is that there are tons of people running around cheerleading this effort that Microsoft engaged in to spool up a bunch of senators to cite this as an area of concern, with the hypothesis being that if it just weren't for Sony making exclusive deals with Japanese developers, Xbox would be more competitive in the Japanese market. And maybe that's true. I mean, mathematically, that's probably true above the level of 0. But I don't believe that it is in such a significant way that it would move the needle. The other suggestion is when you look at this letter, the letter is written, and this is the Republican letter that got posted today. There have been 2 letters that have been written on this topic, one by the Democrats and one by the Republicans. The Democratic letter, I believe it is the one that is, formed from, almost entirely from representatives from the state of Washington, which is obviously the home state of Microsoft. And so, it's again this notion that if it just weren't for this, but the Republican letter is specifically articulated around basically, hey, Sony participates in illegal practices. You guys don't enforce your own sovereign laws within your own nation state, and you turn a blind eye to it, and that's the reason Microsoft doesn't compete.
By the way, I find a lot of irony in that statement about coming from the Republicans.
Well, there's that too, but I'm going to try not to get into that today.
No, I won't get into that, but you probably know where I'm going with that. But yeah, I mean, there's some irony there, but go ahead.
Right. So, I mean, the notion to me is kind of ludicrous. Other tech companies successfully compete in other nations where exclusivity agreements exist. Exclusivity agreements are part of the cloud industry. They're part of the enterprise industry. They're part of various other digital industries. And my feeling is if Microsoft were so concerned about competing in Japan, then instead of spending $70 billion to go after Activision, then maybe they would have made the choice to go after Japanese developers like Sega or Capcom or Square Enix or any other cast of characters. So I'm not sure what the overall strategic intent is of this effort, but where I have a problem with it is where it has come to rest and live amongst the gaming community, specifically the gaming community on Twitter, and the way in which it is interpreted and weaponized. And that is that, again, first of all, it's the cheerleading for this, as if it's some major thing to run a victory lap about. But then on top of that, it's the justification, it's the causality that this is why Microsoft isn't competing in Japan. But then on top of that, the twist that I really find problematic is that this is therefore justification and rationale as to why the Microsoft ATVI merger should be approved by the FTC. It is typical blamesmanship. It is, oh, see, Sony does this.
It's propaganda. Yeah,
right. Sony is the evil company. Microsoft is the good company. We shouldn't be standing in the way of Microsoft acquiring ATVI because of these practices by Sony. And my problem with that logic and rationale is, to date, as far as we know, it has not been proven, or as far as I know, even contested, that the normative behavior of exclusivity deals for platforms in the gaming industry is illegal in any country that I know of. Maybe there are cases that are out there that exist. I'm not going to say that that it's never happened, but I don't think that it's a big, major issue of contestation for which any nation has gone on the war path and tried to tear down the whole practice within the gaming industry. And the second piece of that is the Microsoft ATVI merger has its own litmus test that it needs to pass within the U.S. judicial system, and that doesn't have anything to do with a behavior that's become an accepted norm within the gaming industry for the past 40 years.
And that's the point that people are missing. Like, one has nothing to do with the other. And what's kind of fascinating to me, Game Logic, is that I've seen people, and this is what's really weird to me, that I'm seeing people take these talking points, and I saw it, like you saw this real time as I tweeted this out. Oh, well, there it's anti-competitive behavior. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Based on what? People start referencing this document by the Republicans. And they're saying, oh, it's illegal, it's anti-competitive, it's anti-developer, and I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, like, there's no critical thought that's involved in coming to that conclusion. It's, I'm going to take whatever drives my narrative or whatever props up my corporation that I prefer, which again is weird to me. And I'm going to, because they're the good guys. They're the good guys. And these other guys are the bad guys. And I said this, like, it's trivial to me that people are villainizing Sony in this particular case, because look, the corporations don't care about us. They care about money. They care about separating us from our wallets, as Eric Jackson says. That's all they care about. They don't care about us. Phil Spencer doesn't care about you. Microsoft doesn't care about you. Sony doesn't care about you. Nintendo doesn't care about you. Coca-Cola doesn't care about you. McDonald's doesn't care about you. They do. They care about money. They care about their share. They look out for their shareholders. We know that. But like clockwork, I started seeing some of these, like, these talking points that I've heard on other podcasts and I've read from other more Xbox centric. And by the way, it's not all Xbox fans. I just want to make that clear, because I know someone's going to say, "Oh, BRAP, you're just a pony," or you're generalizing. No, I'm talking about the more extreme elements of people who prefer the Xbox platform, who are discussing these talking points, and now they're running with it as it's gospel, and it totally spits on the face of the fact that hey, we've had, like you said, Game Logic, this has been a practice that has been part of the gaming industry for the last 30 plus years and has never been deemed illegal or anti-competitive. And
I also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the fact that people are trying to argue this now on like, in light of the historical precedents here, like, it's crazy. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, what the joke is, what the joke is to me too is the hypocrisy, right, and the inconsistency with where proponents of the Microsoft ATVI merger have argued. They have leaned heavily on precedent. They have leaned heavily on it's a vertical merger. We've always allowed vertical mergers to go through. Why are we looking at this differently now? To which I would flip that around and say the same thing. Exclusives have been part of the industry since the 1980s. We've allowed them to persist. Various judicial systems have allowed them to exist. Why are we now trying to say that that should be reversed? And I don't necessarily have a problem if somebody wants to raise that up. But the point is raise it up as a unilateral issue. Say that, and this is what's weird to me, because this is where your line of reasoning goes if you follow it all the way through. The rhetoric that seems to be that they're attempting to build now is that all exclusives are bad, or at least that third-party exclusives are bad, and therefore the only exclusives that should exist are, I guess, first-party exclusives, which seems a weird argument coming from a camp of people who have an anemic set of first-party exclusives in comparison to the PlayStation platform. And so the problem with this is, as I presented today, actually, as I presented a couple of weeks ago, the problem with that is if you're going to take an industry, and again, I have no problems if the industry comes together and unilaterally says, hey, third-party exclusives are bad. Let's all stop doing them, and comes up with a manner of self-regulating, right, in order to do that. Mm-hmm. But that's very, very, very unlikely to happen. And therefore, the only way that it could happen is to increase the amount of government regulation that's provided on the industry as a matter of oversight. And that seems to be a weird thing to ask from a group of people who are concurrently saying the FTC shouldn't be interfering in the merger. We should get the government out of gaming.
There's a lot of intellectual inconsistencies here. You know, it's and that's the problem that I have with this. But that's the byproduct of being a fanatic.
Right. And the other thing I'll mention is, okay, so if third-party exclusives are somehow now bad, and there was a lot of argumentation arguing today about, well, nobody's saying that all exclusives are illegal. And as I asked, well, what's the rubric? What's the threshold? What are the determining factors that says a thing is illegal or a thing's legal? Because none of the arguments that have been offered by that camp and that party have elicited those. None of them have listed them. And if you list them, then again, what's the contention that any of the deals that Sony has made fall within those bounds, right? Cut across those lines. Any basis for that is conjecture and speculation. I mean, what to me is provable and valid and factual is that exclusives within the gaming industry, as I mentioned before, have not been a major issue that any country has gone after as a practice that they've attempted to run out of the industry. And the last thing that I'll mention on this, before I pass it back over to you, I'm sorry, is if you go down that path and follow the logic all the way through, third-party exclusives are bad. We should get rid of them. That requires additional government regulation. Where it also eventually lands is that inherently, to me, means that you would eventually start moving the industry towards separation of the platform owners from also being publishers. Because if third-party exclusives are bad, that's fine. But part of the problem I have is, and again, it's difficult for me to tell exactly what these people are arguing. So I can't tell if it's third-party exclusives are bad or all exclusives are bad. But if you're going to say third-party exclusives are bad, what I don't think is fair and even-handed is to say first-party exclusives are okay, and then to allow Microsoft, who has the resources to do so, right, to then go around and acquire more and more studios as a way to skirt the topic and skate around the issue, right, and enable themselves to have more first-party exclusives than anyone else, right? So when people start making that argument, then again, like I said, then you're going to start pushing towards the notion that perhaps there should be separation from platform owners also being publishers, which I think is an inherent problem with this deal, and is why a lot of the characterization of the merger isn't solely defined by it being a vertical merger. Because the fact of the matter is that Microsoft as a publisher also competes with Activision as a publisher.
Yeah. No, those are great points, Hap. I mean, and I just can't believe that this conversation went here. And again, the other thing is that people are treating like Sony's the mob boss here. They're forcing them to make these deals. Sony's not forcing these publishers to enter into these agreements. These companies aren't entering into these agreements because they don't feel like there's any kind of there's no benefit to them for doing so. There absolutely is a benefit. That's why they make these deals. Square Enix was just talking about this. It made sense for them to enter a deal with Final Fantasy 16 because Sony was able to provide some resources for development. Microsoft has done similar deals where they have helped with publishing and development of games that they've had third-party agreements with. Like if you're a platform owner, you're going to invest resources in development of a game, you're going to want something out of it. It's a win-win for both sides. And I've said this before on the show, like these deals aren't made willy-nilly. It's not like Sony's going into the offices at Square Enix and strong-arming them and saying, hey, put this game on PlayStation or else. And look, there's the reality of this. Game Logic, we talked about this before, that PlayStation does have an advantage that, look, they have 100 and I forget how many PlayStation 4s they have in the wild, 140 million, 130 million, 120. I don't remember. Maybe let's just say 120 for argument's sake. Plus, they have PlayStation 5s in the wild.
Yep, putting their user base somewhere around, just for the sake of argument, like you said, probably between 120 million and 140 million people.
Yeah. So
in the meantime, we know that the Xbox One got outsold 2-1 last generation, putting you around probably 60 million consoles, right? Mm-hmm. And then they've sold, something a skosh above 20 million, right, this generation. So I've pegged their user base at somewhere around 60 million to 80 million.
Yeah, and there's something to be said to have access to that many more players on the PlayStation platform. That gives them a competitive advantage. But what I don't understand is people faulting Xbox not performing at the same level as, let's say, PlayStation in the market on Sony. Again, this is the $1 trillion company. That argument just doesn't fly. It doesn't hold water.
Yep.
Microsoft's mistakes are well documented. Clearly they're making moves now to be more competitive in the market, and I don't disagree with that. I've said this about the ABK deal. It's their prerogative to buy publishers to compete. I don't have an issue with that. I do have concerns about consolidation, but I'm also not out here saying that they shouldn't be buying companies or publishers. They clearly have they had a problem with content. They're addressing those things. I don't have an issue with that. Hopefully, as a consumer, I benefit from that as I own the platform, the Xbox. Go ahead, Game Logic.
Yeah, no, it's just very simple business math, and I don't understand why people try and make it so complex and try and make so many excuses for it. I used to be involved in selling software to not solely publicly owned, but to electrical utilities.
Wait, real quick, man. I'm sorry. You know why it's hard for people to understand? Because they don't take the time to do the research. They listen to their favorite, X assert whatever name podcast, and they go in there and they listen to these guys talk about, oh, they're evil, they're hurting Microsoft. Microsoft can't compete, and it's never holding a corporation accountable. It's always deflection. It's always blaming the other corporation for the failures of the corporation that they pom for. But they never step back, try to understand the industry, look at the historical context here. As you talked about earlier, the fact that these third-party deals, time exclusives, aren't unique to the industry, have never been deemed illegal. When someone's like, "Oh, so are you saying they can never be illegal?" What? Like, why? Why are we even asking that question? It's irrelevant. They're not legal. That's the point. They weren't illegal yesterday. They aren't illegal today either. I'm sorry, man. Go ahead.
No, I totally understand. And so, my case in point about, the companies are already incentivized to make these deals. They're already leaned in the direction where these deals make sense. The example I was given was, one of the jobs I had was involved in selling software to electrical utilities. And the electrical utilities who had, and so we were heavily driven and heavily incentivized based on our licensing model to skate to the utilities who had the most customers. And so the utilities who had the most customers, there were efforts to sign us to exclusive deals, but it wasn't, absolutely necessary, right? We're going to listen to the input from the companies that have the largest install base, when our licensing model, our revenue model, is driven by users, right? And so it's the same thing, right, in many, many, many other industries. Why are developers incentivized to make apps for iOS before Android? Why are some of them in many cases oriented around only making the app for iOS, right? Even though in that case, Android technically had more worldwide users for a long period of time, maybe still holds that advantage, although Apple has been catching up. But the point is that, Apple had a heavier install base in the United States, in some of your first world countries. Therefore, they had people who were more oriented to spending money for apps, right? Supporting the developers. And so they don't need a ton of incentive to make apps to prioritize for a platform that's going to better drive their revenue. So therefore, it makes sense for these developers, for these publishers, to sign deals with Sony where they're going to get exposed to a larger install base, get greater visibility for their app, for their game, and have the potential to sell it through. One of the other things that needs to be recognized, and this is, I think I've laid back a little bit off of this for the first few years of Game Pass, but it needs to be driven more to the forefront now. Obviously, we've had the stories about cannibalization, which Microsoft contends happens in the out months after a game's release. But the point of the fact,
Activision say to themselves that they don't put Call of Duty right now on Game Pass because of cannibalization of sales.
Exactly, and neither does Strauss-Zelnick in terms of his premier content. Right, he'll put the stuff that's out there that's kind of B tier kind of stuff, but he's not putting his crown jewels out on Game Pass, and that makes sense. And the reason is, as you mentioned, cannibalization. That reason is because when you put out a game on Game Pass, the competitive environment that you're going into on that platform is, why would people pay full price for your game when they can play games in Game Pass? What's funny is Xbox fans will try to take that off the table while they can currently run around and say that very thing, right, in an effort to weaponize against PlayStation, right? They will say, who would ever go pay $70 for a game when it's available in Game Pass and you could pay it and you could play it for $15 a month? So, and that's not a criticism. That's just simple definition of the competitive environment in the market. One of the problems Nintendo has, one of the problems they had with the Nintendo Wii, one of the problems they have with the Nintendo Switch is you get large third-party publishers who don't focus on deploying their games to the Switch, not only because of the hardware differential, but because when they go onto that platform, they suffer a more intense competitive environment than they do on the other platforms with regards to the platform owner, because so many people flock to Nintendo first party titles who own that Nintendo platform. You have a lot more people on Xbox and PlayStation who consume a lot of the third party content and a lot of the additional content. But on the Nintendo platform, you have so many people on that platform who are all going to go after the big marquee Nintendo first party title when it comes out. And so what companies have to consider is they have to consider, what is my sell through going to be on the Nintendo Switch when my major competitor on the Nintendo Switch is Nintendo? You know, on PlayStation, God of War comes out, it sells 20 million copies. That's significant, sure, but that's 20 million copies out of a 120 to 140 million user install base, right? And so when a third-party publisher thinks about going to PlayStation, one of the things they look at is, hey, while I'm competing against Sony, I'm competing against Sony, but to an extent that I still have 100 million people plus available to sell to, who maybe aren't interested in playing God of War Ragnarok, or maybe aren't interested in playing Spider-Man, or maybe aren't interested in whatever the first-party content is. Now, I know PlayStation fans will say, oh, well, everybody's interested. Well, if everybody was interested in that first-party title, then it would sell more than 20 million units. And again, 20 million units is successful. I'm not trying to take that success, that goodness off the table, right? But I am saying that mathematically, they don't sell to everyone on the platform. And that creates greater latitude and greater opportunity for other people coming to, other publishers coming to compete on that platform than Nintendo. And so that analogous competitive problem needs to start being acknowledged by Microsoft fans as well. That while
By
Game
the way,
Pass,
I love the hubris of the diehard PlayStation fans and think everyone buys PlayStations for their first party.
right. Yeah, but what Xbox fans need to start acknowledging is that while Game Pass is an incredible good and is a great value, I'm a Game Pass subscriber. I play tons of stuff on Game Pass. I'm about to play Persona 3 Portable tonight on Game Pass. I've been playing it for the last few days. I don't know that a lot of other Microsoft and Xbox fans are playing Persona 3 Portable or some of the games. And this is a point that you've raised very often, is here's a title from a Japanese developer that probably isn't getting a ton of uptake on the Xbox platform. And Jesus Marimba, that might be a reason why Microsoft is having a problem competing in Japan. Right? But Xbox fans need to start acknowledging that Game Pass is a two-edged sword, right? It's really great for consumers, as again, lots of people will contend is the reason why the ATVI merger should go through, right? But when those Activision Blizzard titles land on the Xbox platform, and if any of them become exclusive and any of them go into Game Pass, that exacerbates the problem, right? Why would I bother putting my game on the Xbox platform when it's going to compete against Activision Blizzard properties now on top of Bethesda properties that people can access for a $15 a month monthly subscription? It won't drive that incentive to zero, but it's definitely going to be a negative knock on that incentive to target your game for the Xbox platform.
There's a lot of people I've seen people, part of the narrative that we're seeing about, Sony, making illegal deals, or they're not competing, or they're not. I saw somebody say Sony's not really hope the ABK deal goes through because it'll force Sony to actually try hard. What? Like how? You think Sony got to the position it's in right now by not trying hard? Like that's.
Well, I won't take that away. But what I will say, and I've said this about the deal, I don't think that knock-on effect is net zero either. Right?
I don't agree. I don't disagree, and I do think it'll. I mean, obviously they have 10 live services games in the works,
right?
And clearly they're pivoting. Look, I mean, as much as like, and I'm sorry to interrupt your logic, but as much as people think that Sony isn't going to pivot, they're doing it right now. I say that, I mean, like the diehard Sony fans, they're not going to really focus on subscriptions, really, because they are releasing certain games day and date into the service, not their first party, for the reasons I think as Charles Zalnick mentioned. Why would you cannibalize your titles that are going to make you a lot of money, right? And it makes more sense to put those titles into older when they become older, once they reach that retail maturation point, whenever that is, dump into that service and drive some additional engagement with those titles. But but no, I mean, they're certainly pivoting, I think, to, and I've had this this back and forth with diehard PlayStation fans that are like, oh, Sony's never going to go PC, and then they did. They're not really going to focus on subscription services. Yeah, maybe not to the extent that Microsoft is, but look, they're starting to invest more into PlayStation Plus. They are putting games into that service day and date, smaller titles. So go ahead, Game Launcher. I didn't mean to interrupt, man, but just wanted to bring that.
No, that's cool. I was interrupting you. But yeah, I mean, look, I don't really agree with that dumb, silly, childish, goofy, PlayStation meme of like the white caricature with the blue cap on, with the crying rivers of tears coming out of its eyes. But I do feel it is applicable when PlayStation fans are angry about their games going to PC. As you said, right, the pivot has already started. B-Money talks to us all the time about, look, the pivot was started as soon as Microsoft went after Bethesda, right? It was an awakening at Sony that caused them to start reassessing the competitive landscape. And again, as we often talk about with these businesses, right, these businesses look, if Microsoft knows that Game Pass is cannibalizing game sales, they're not sitting idle waiting for that train wreck to occur in 3 years or 5 years to really become a problem. They're thinking right now about how do they need to continue to shape and change the competitive battlefield and reposition and reposture themselves, right, for that becoming an acute problem before it becomes an acute problem. And so where I applaud Sony, I mean, I've commented before about, right, my concern with Sony as a person who has studied and looked at a lot of these business cases academically. A lot of my academic work was looking at the transition of IBM, the transition of Microsoft, the transition of people who didn't make a transition like Wang, the transition of Seagate, the innovator's dilemma and all those sorts of things. My concern with Sony is I was like, man, I'm really waiting to see Sony make a course change. They seem to be barreling the ship down on course 000 and doubling down on just continuing to do the same things that they've always done. And I'm impressed from the point of observing, how businesses behave on a market, to see that Sony finally kind of shook off of that. And what I applaud is, hey, look, the last time this for PlayStation fans, right? The last time that Sony's back was against the wall, right? What we got was we got now I can't remember the name of the franchise, but we got Uncharted. We got other key cornerstone IPs out of the PlayStation 3 generation. We got Resistance: Fall of Man, which unfortunately hasn't been continued, right? But we got lots of great IP out of Sony, understanding that they flubbed the launch of the PlayStation 3 and that they needed to get back to making it about gaming and not about prestige, right? Because that was the problem with the launch of the PlayStation 3 generation. It was, oh, let's cheerlead and pom-pom the notion that this is a highly desirable luxury device, right? Kind of like the way Sony behaved. I always joke to bring some antiquated references into the mix about how, when I was a kid growing up, everybody was rah-rah about buying that first component system coming out of college and targeting, right, having a complete Sony stack, right? Your dual CD player, CD changer, or dual tape deck, CD changer, and the amplifier receiver, and then Sony speakers, right? That was a prestige item. And that's what they based the launch on, instead of basing the launch around the games. So, I think that part of it will be positive. But it's just, like I said, it's just interesting, kind of the as you and I talked about today, right? The institutionalization and the dogma that various people run around preaching. When you put out these things that are perceived as negative about Xbox, amazingly, a bunch of Xbox fans show up, like flies jumping on dung, to defend the Microsoft corporation. When, like I said, 99% of the mistakes and errors are Microsoft problems, right? They're not because of Sony. And I, as an Xbox fan, we had a rant this weekend, right? Am bothered by that. the individual that we spent a ton of time with arguing today is for some weird zealotous reason saying, well, PlayStation fans should be holding Sony accountable. And I'm like, great flipping Scott, dude. I mean, like, look at the math. What, the 120 to 140 million users over there that appear to be completely satisfied? Like, how about Xbox fans holding Xbox accountable, right, for what it hasn't done and what it hasn't delivered? Right. Again, as I talked about this Sunday, as I sit here with still no release date for Forza Motorsport, which is one of their now because there isn't much left and there isn't much apparent that people are working on, is one of two of their flagship, first party properties.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I mean, it's like that's the deflection, though. That is the tried and true deflection that people do to not hold Microsoft accountable. And when you do hold them accountable, people will tell you that you're a pony, or that you're pro Sony, or that you hate Xbox. I mean, I guess it's again, we've talked a lot about this on BRAP. It's really, you can enjoy something and be part of an ecosystem and still be critical of the things that you feel aren't living up to your expectation of that ecosystem. I don't know why it's hard for people to grasp that concept. Like, you don't have, it's this idea that you can't be critical of something you enjoy. Again, this is why I use that, I say things like QAnon levels, extreme, right wing, tactics, because that behavior is analogous to those particular groups, and it's just, you're doing yourself a disservice as a consumer if you don't voice and speak out against things that you're not happy with, about a consumer product that you've purchased or an ecosystem that you're in, and it's okay to do that. But it's the other thing too is, geez, I keep thinking about what that person said about the Sony fans should be holding them accountable. I'm like, why? The other thing too, game logic. I mean, look, the market, people also skate by the market. The fact that the market will reject or accept certain things, right? We talked about this on this show. I mean, right. There's a reason why Sony's done so well. There's a reason why Nintendo's doing well right now. The market has said, hey, we like those products. We like the ecosystem. We like the content. And they're just doing it or buying it at or they're engaging at higher numbers than Xbox. Doesn't mean Xbox is bad. It just means the majority of people who are gaming prefer those other platforms over Xbox. Just like other consumer products. Burger King's not as big as McDonald's, but people do like going to Burger King. Doesn't make Burger King bad because it's not as big or popular as McDonald's. I know people hate food analogies, but that's probably the easiest analogy to make.
Right, and a lot of this is about, again, it's super weird to me. This and we do this all across gaming. This knuckling down on my perspective defines the perspective that the entire rest of the market should have. One of the arguments was, please explain why consumers should not speak out when Sony explicitly works against their interests. So first of all, the notion that Sony getting third-party publisher exclusives onto its platform somehow works against the interests of people who are involved in its ecosystem seems pretty ludicrous. One of the arguments was that, how did that provide anything tangible? And like I said, I don't necessarily put a high value on the prestige factor that PlayStation focuses on, but just because I don't, doesn't mean that's the way every other consumer views it. Obviously, that prestige factor matters to some other consumers, right? And is a reason why some of those consoles move. I may not put a huge ton of value on the prestige factor, but I tell you what, the prestige factor has helped sell a lot of iPhones. The prestige factor sells a lot of MacBooks, right? The prestige factor sells a lot of other things that are luxury items that are not that great in terms of functionality when you talk about consumer electronics, but hold a prestige factor. I don't like the functionality of the PlayStation UI. I don't like the industrial design of the PlayStation. I have, for every generation prior to this one, not been a fan of the PlayStation controller. right? However, that doesn't mean that the other 120 to 140 million people who have bought the platform see things the way that I do. And while I might speak out about those things on the Sony PlayStation platform, it's really lacking in self-awareness to expect that every other fan will.
Yeah, I agree 110%. You know, hence my commentary on the diehard PlayStation fans and their hubris over their Sony's first party games. No, not everybody wants those games, by the way. You know, but you know, the other thing too is you know, we talked about the business piece earlier. People kind of sidestep the dynamics. Why publishers are more apt to put or to maybe make deals with Sony, and we talked about, you know, the install base. But there is something to be said for that, you know, and you know, companies aren't making these decisions willy-nilly. There's a lot of analysis that goes into this thought or these thoughts. That's why when people say, "Oh, Octopath Traveler's not on Tuesday, not on Xbox," well, I mean, again, is it? You have to imagine Square Enix looked at the engagement numbers on Octopath Traveler on Xbox, and they may have said, "Hey, you know what? Our ROI on Xbox, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for us to put Octopath Traveler 2 based on how that game performed on the Xbox platform." It happens. Those are the kinds of decisions people make. These are businesses. They want to make money. They want to put whatever, you know, they want to put their product in the best position, the best possible position to be successful. And if that product isn't selling on the Xbox platform, you can't be mad at a publisher or developer for not wanting to put a sequel on that platform if it didn't sell well to begin with.
Right. So I want to hit a couple other kind of ludicrous arguments in this thread. One of the comments was, "Are you seriously trying to argue that PlayStation users get tangible benefits directly from Sony's market share going up?" That is literally arguing that monopolies are pro-consumer. So first of all, again, Sony's obviously not a monopoly. They're a market leader. Invoking the monopoly term is, again, a deflection round, obfuscation, distraction. And again, I go to that prestige factor, right? I may not put value on it, but some consumers do. Lots of people put value on the fact that lots of other people have Ford Explorers. I don't personally think that the Ford Explorer is a great vehicle, but a lot of people enjoy owning that product and having that camaraderie. A lot of people enjoy having iPhones because a lot of other people have iPhones. A lot of people put value on the notion, whether it's correct or not, that they have bought the best, most preferred product that a lot of people use, right? I'm the type of user that literally, and this literally happened. I'm the type of user that when I get on the little bus that takes you to the different concourse, right, in the airport, and the doors close, and literally everyone on the bus pulls out a Motorola Razr, I'm the type of person who says, "Okay, I'm done. My next phone is not going to be a Motorola Razr now that everybody has it." But a lot of the other people get benefit from that. Market share going up, by the way, for a type of thing like a gaming platform means there's more revenue and there's more reason for the corporation to invest in the product. And that's what some people who are part of the PlayStation community feel. And again, this is not solely a Sony problem. Microsoft is heavily engaged. Great Scott. Microsoft owns Microsoft is basically a natural monopoly in the enterprise Office world. Right? They have all of the significant market share. No one. We get all these arguments and people throwing absolutes in my face. No one is going out and running their enterprise on LibreOffice, right? Which is the free Google Linux version, right? Yeah, and lots of people use Google Office, but it hasn't assaulted Microsoft's, right? And one of the reasons is because for the submission of government paperwork, some of that government paperwork they insist be in Microsoft Word format, right? So are there tangible benefits directly from anyone's market share going up? Let's not limit it to Sony. This is another part of my problem with the arguments in this space. Not everyone sees tangible benefits, but some users do. I mean, and then another one from this person is PlayStation users didn't get any new content or pricing deals or better access to any game Sony paid to lock down on the basis of those deals. These deals are not to create new content or access. These deals are to prevent content or access on competing platforms. Again, that is a self-centered perspective. I don't know. Again, I don't know that it makes sense. I don't necessarily agree with it, but there are tons of PlayStation users who perceive, again, prestige value from the fact that Spider-Man is only available on the PlayStation platform. They often weaponize it. They often throw it in Xbox users' face. And I apologize for that. And I apologize that a lot of you guys are out there suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, as I've referred to, many months beforehand. By the way, David Jaffe, I'm certain is platforming off of my earlier use of that term in his most recent dialogue.
Yeah, David Jaffe.
But I cited it first.
Yeah. No, you did. David Jaffe just, wow. Like he said that, like, Phil Spencer's like they're abusers, the Xbox fan. I mean, I'm just like, Jesus, Jaffe. I wouldn't have used that analogy, but no, I mean, yeah, I mean,
but he's spot on, right? And this is the problem I have with where this narrative is going, because our platform, right, that I like, but that I prefer playing on, has failed to deliver some of those exclusives. Now,
which is the Xbox platform,
right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, third-party exclusives are bad. I'm like, hold on a second, right? What kind of wackadoodle flip around and play is that? No, how about, again, Xbox fans start demanding that type of content be made available to us? How about if we're actually unhappy about the amount of JRPG content there is on the Xbox platform, right? That we hold Xbox accountable, that we hold Microsoft accountable, and demand that they provide it.
But how about they engage on those titles though too? Because Microsoft,
exactly, yeah.
In defense of Xbox, Phil's done a great job, by the way, of getting more of those JRPGs onto Game Pass. So would people are like, oh my God, Sony's blocking games from coming to Game Pass? Okay, what about all the other games that have come to Game Pass that you guys aren't playing? What about those games? What about the Dragon Quest 11? What about the Persona 4 Golden or Persona 3 Portable? Is that what it's called? Or I forget what it's called.
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing Persona 3 Portable, but I mean, all Portable, the Persona titles are on.
Yeah,
right?
but those Persona 5's in Game Pass. I mean, what about those games? I went out there and I said Dragon Quest 11 is huge get for Microsoft. I don't think that, and I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive that there hasn't been a Dragon Quest title on the Xbox platform previously to this. Okay, they got Dragon Quest 11 Game Pass. Huge get. Persona 5, Persona 4 Golden, Persona 3, Persona. I mean, those are big gets. Neo Kuni 2 is on Game Pass. And so this is the part that kind of like has me scratching my head and leads me to saying you guys are full of it, because it's not, you guys aren't a big, maybe you guys are appreciative of it, but it doesn't seem that way, because a lot of the diehards are so hyper focused on Sony instead of just being focused on the great job Phil and company have done in bringing some of these games to Game Pass, because those are tremendous additions, in my opinion. And instead the focus is, they're trying to keep games off of Game Pass. Oh, okay. Why is that a problem? Microsoft's about to drop $70 billion on a publisher. They just bought another publisher a couple of years ago for $9 billion. I mean, why is it okay for Microsoft to do deals and not Sony?
Right. And again,
why are we? I'm sorry. Why aren't we celebrating the games that have come into Game Pass? Are you playing those games? Because I'm starting to wonder. It just kind of goes back to your rant this past weekend about people being fraudulent. I'm starting to wonder if they're actually playing games. And based on the behavior that I'm seeing for some of these quote unquote gamers, I'm doubting that, because you wouldn't be hyper focused on Sony keeping certain games away from Game Pass when you have so many. When you talk about how Game Pass has over 200 games and all these games are great on Game Pass. It's such a tremendous value add. To me, that wouldn't be the thing that you're focused on.
Right. You would seem to be too busy. But
yeah, you'd be actually gaming, enjoying content, you know?
Right.
Go ahead, Logic.
As was the case in point with this individual when I looked at their page and basically saw zero evidence that they actually play games, but a wall full of retweets of Xbox brand aligned podcasts and legal documents protesting support for the ATVI merger. But another one of their points of contention, if I read this already, I apologize. PlayStation users didn't get any new content or pricing deals or better access to any game Sony paid to lock down on the basis of those deals. These deals are not to create new content access. These deals are to prevent content access on competing platforms. So I'd already addressed that topic, shortly before that. When you're attempting to gain market share, you have one of three ways of doing that, right? You can either differentiate your product, so that people find your product attractive, and then migrate in that direction. You can, take market share that your current competitor has, or you can block them off or freeze them out from addressing part of the market. That's competing. Just like Microsoft buying Activision is competing. Again, people try and make these arguments a lot of a matter of being a PlayStation fan, and as I dressed very, very loudly with an individual this weekend, an individual who, by the way, was willing to listen, and so we were able to come through, what was an argument. But again, I don't worry about those things because I'm not a PlayStation fan. So what PlayStation is doing doesn't matter to me as much. But my point here is, again, we go back to this being kind of a self-centered view, and we go back to a lack of consideration that there's long game in gaining market share, right? That if developers say, hey, the platform that has the greatest growth potential, the platform that has the greatest exposure, is the one that we should target, is the one that we should prioritize, then the notion that you're locking down exclusive deals and keeping them off the Xbox platform, that may not directly add to, create the instance of new content on the platform, but it does create access to new content over the long term, right? Look at all the relationships that Sony has with studios who have decided to solely make content for the PlayStation platform. Not studios that they own, but studios that have said, our primary focus is going to be around making games for the PlayStation platform. That's where Insomniac was for a very long time before they became a Sony acquisition, right? They were incentivized to make games, to put on the platform that provided the greatest opportunity for them to get revenue, right? So this notion that, well, there's no tangible benefits from that, that's an opinionated perspective. That's a self-centered perspective. I often preach to people, maybe you would be better at assessing the market if you didn't assume that everybody else in the market looked at things the way that you did. These deals are not to create new content or access. Maybe not directly, but maybe they open up opportunities for Sony to then make deals like it has made for Call of Duty, as I went through with you today, right? Is there new content or new access or better pricing deals on the PlayStation platform when it comes to Call of Duty? Yeah, there are lots of users who think that extra 25% bonus XP that they get when they're in a PlayStation party is a better pricing deal and a new content and new access and a better deal than buying it on Xbox. That those people get a day's early access to double XP. That those people get skins and levels and sometimes LTMs and LTEs that Xbox doesn't get. It's kind of a joke that Xbox will eventually get access to those things a year after, right? That limited exclusivity expires on that version of Call of Duty, just in time for the next version of Call of Duty to come out, which kind of makes it irrelevant that it's now available on Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So again, I think my contention with this issue is, if you pulled back and had a holistic view of where all the pieces are on the chessboard, then you would have a different vision. And again, if Sony fans or PlayStation fans feel like they're being impugned by Sony, then let them worry about that. Right? Let's spend time focusing on what is Microsoft doing for us and stop worrying about what little Tommy has or what little Susie did.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree, Logic. I don't disagree. Well, look, I do want to wrap up this video here. We're about an hour. No, Logic. I mean, look, I just this again. I'm still kind of I went back and started as you were talking there. I was kind of went back and started rereading some of the comments in the threads. It just head scratchers, man. Head scratchers. I don't understand what's happening here. I really don't. I don't. And I don't disagree with you. Based on your rant this past weekend, I am starting. I don't think I've ever really questioned this per se, but I am starting to question whether or not these people actually do care about gaming and whether they're actually playing video games.
Yeah, look, people aren't going to like it. You can be upset with me all you want to, but I'm just getting to the point now where I'm just going to get out of my face if you're not actually a gamer.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can't tell, like, you're up in my face on Twitter, right? Which is the area that you decide to come to the fight, and I go pull a thread on who you are. And again, I said myself that part of my problem is when people have arguments that they don't argue the tenets of the case, that they, impugn your character and, start worrying about who you are and who's saying a thing. That's true. That's my own argument, right? And I will hold to that argument to a certain extent, right? But the more and more you go down the rabbit hole of dumb, stupid arguments, right? The more you go down the rabbit hole of you're yapping and talking to the brick wall and I'm ignoring you, and you're not self-aware enough to understand that I'm either ignoring you or you've been muted. And quite frankly, I've just grown to a point where I've decided that that muting and blocking you guys is more effort than you're worth. I'll just ignore you. I'll see the notification pop up on my phone and I'll just swipe it away. But at a certain point, I am going to go pull the thread and look at who you are. And if you're not a person who actually plays video games and you're just up here war riding for whatever reason, I don't really understand why. But if you're one of the people that we've talked about tonight, that like, we can't tell that you play Persona 5 or JRPGs when they do come to the Xbox platform. We can't tell whether or not you've ever gotten upset at Microsoft about the fact that we don't have a release date for Forza. We can't tell that you ever got upset with Microsoft that they slipped the date on Starfield twice, right? But for a while held silent about the fact that they had done that when they did a showcase in June and said it was going to be here in 12 months, right? But they were silent about that, about the showcase, at the showcase in January, as if we had forgotten about it, and then told us about it at the beginning of March. While you're up here running around talking about what Sony fans should be expressing discontent for about the PlayStation platform, while in the meantime, you're not taking care of trying to escape the Swedish bank robbers, and you're up here suffering under your own Stockholm syndrome. I'm just going to start looking at that and just saying you're not credible and you're a fraud and you should perhaps move on.
All right, Game Logic. Well, look, on that note, we're going to wrap up this video. But look, do me a favor, smash the like button. If you enjoyed today's content, hit the bell notification and subscribe. And we'll be back. BRAP will be back this actually later today at 9 p.m. Eastern time. But hopefully everyone enjoyed this video. Just a little food for thought. But please join us at 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight on Basement Radio Arcade Podcast. I think Game Logic, are you joining us for the show, or?
I will, sir. I will be there with bells on.
Game Logic will be joining us again, and then of course the panel of B Money, Slow-mo backslap, and Gaming Forte. So thank you everyone for watching this video. Please let us know your thoughts on this particular topic. Again, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. So hope everyone enjoyed this video. We will catch you at 9 p.m. Eastern time today, or actually say this evening. So thank you again. We'll see you.